Are you struggling through a dark night of the soul that seems to have no end? Do you feel like life is going in circles no matter what you do? And do you feel alone, stuck, lost, depressed, and can't find a way out? If so, this video is for you. Hi, I'm Yong Kang, and I experienced two dark nights of the soul. I know how challenging this period is, but you're not alone. In this video, I'm going to share with you why your dark night of the soul is taking so long to end, and provide you with some tips to get through this emotional period quicker. First of all, we need to understand that the dark night of the soul is not an incremental process. It's not like you're charging your phone 1%, 2%, 3%, and when you reach 100%, you're done. The dark night of the soul is more like you are in a train going through a long tunnel. There's a long period of darkness, and then more darkness. And then at the last moment when you're finally getting out of the tunnel, the light fills your whole perception. Everything suddenly becomes clear now. This is how the dark night of the soul feels like. 99% of the time, you're in darkness. Only at the last moment during the end, you experience light. Most of the time, we are in the dark night, we're not connected to our spirit. It's only at the last moment when we finally see what our spirit sees. That is the moment our dark night of the soul will end. So many times when we approach the dark night, we see that our situation is not getting better. We don't see a solution out of it, and that makes us feel very lost and depressed. But it's exactly this despair that we're feeling that perpetuates the dark night of the soul. It makes the tunnel much longer than it should be, because wherever we are in this vibration of despair, we attract more thoughts of despair. We think this is not going to work. I'm never going to get out of this, and everything seems meaningless. This state of despair prevents us from seeing the spirit perspective and receiving the help that is always available. You see, a dark night is not complete darkness. It just appears to be because we are in the state of despair. If you go outdoors during the night and just gaze at the dark sky for a while, you might see the moon or a little star shining ever so slightly in the sky. There are guiding stars in your dark night phase. To get out of the dark night quicker, you need to be open, aware, and receptive to this guiding star. It can come in the form of a great book, a blog post, or even a video. It can come from your own insight or a conversation you have with someone. When I first experienced my dark night, my egoic identity was attached to my career. I didn't have a career, I didn't have a career direction and purpose. I tried several things and I didn't find them meaningful, and I felt so hopeless and lost and depressed. At the time, I didn't want to let anyone know that I was depressed. Even when I was eating my lunch and my parents went out, I was like back facing them and saying goodbye to them, but I have tears streaming down my face. My parents didn't know I was depressed until my mom read my book a year later. But my brother did. He was my guiding star. He noticed that I wasn't my usual self, and he asked me how I was and helped me brainstorm a list of 10 careers that I could do. And even though what he shared wasn't necessarily what eventually got me out of the dark night, it lifted me up to a state where I could hear my intuition. Then one day I was feeling so restless and I got this impulse to take a walk at the park. It was another guiding star. I could have just ignored it and say that I'm feeling tired, I don't want to go anywhere. But I followed the guidance, and the rest was history. My dark night of the soul was lifted that day. I did a video on this and I'll leave a link somewhere so that you can listen to the full story. But what I'm trying to say here is that there is always help and guiding stars available. However, you just need to be open to receive them, otherwise you'll miss them. A candle shines the brightest in the darkest room. The darker the room is, the brighter the light within you will shine. Let me repeat this. The darker the room is, the brighter the light within you will shine. Your spirit is always with you and has the answer to what you want. And the darker your state is, the bigger the contrast, the clearer the spirit illuminates. The clearer your desire and the spiritual perspective will be. Your spirit is there shining even brighter to help you. So don't lose hope during this time, but do open your eyes a little wider to see what's available, and open your heart a little more to receive the guidance. I always wonder why my second dark night is so much longer than the first one, and I realized that there are two key things. Firstly, my first dark night was more intense. I really hit rock bottom with that one. I was basically left with two choices: physical death or ego death, and I chose ego death. The situation called for an immediate decision, and that's why it ended quicker. Secondly, if you have gone through multiple dark nights, you might notice that each dark night has a specific theme to it. My first one is about my attachment to my career. My second dark night is about my attachment to relationship in general. I have less attachment to my career than my relationship. I was able to let go of whatever false belief that my ego has much faster. There are 5 stages of the dark night, and the first 2 stages we don't talk about them much. They are the realization stage and the denial stage. The realization stage is when you realize that a belief that you once held is no longer valid. For example, for my first dark night, my false belief is that being an animator will make me happy. My second dark night, my false belief is meeting new people, I'll be less lonely. For someone who lost a loved one, their belief might be that their loved one are going to live for another 10 to 20 years. Or if you have a chronic illness, your belief might be that you think work and relationship are more important than your health. Your health is only something of concern when you get much older. Whatever the case is, at this stage your belief is being shattered. However, for most of us, we don't get into the dark phase immediately. Our ego will not want to lose control of its narrative. It will do the best it can to defend its position and consider its flawed premise. I call this the denial stage. So in my case, the animation job didn't work for me. My ego was like, you can be an entrepreneur in the animation industry. If animation doesn't work for you, you can be a teacher, you can be a therapist. My ego keeps finding a replacement to perpetuate its story. If this didn't make you happy, how about this? Still no? How about that? When it comes to my second dark night, the denial stage dragged on much longer. That's because I'm an idealistic and I am a hopeless romantic. My ego was like, maybe the next person will be better. Maybe the next group of friends will understand me better. And I kept falling into love with people that are emotionally unavailable. Or I will go to new groups hoping that this is finally the community that I feel belong. But I will just end up feeling more disappointed and heartbroken. This is not to say that you cannot have a fulfilling job or a wonderful relationship. But the false premise here is that we believe we need to get or achieve something to make us happy. The truth, however, is that our spirit are happy without any of this condition. Our ego constantly needs to find a replacement to continue their narrative. Our spirit doesn't. Our spirit knows what we desire from the soul level, will eventually make their way to us when we are in alignment. There will be a point where your ego can no longer cover up its fraud premise anymore. When we finally accept that all these replacements are not going to work, all these conditions are not going to make us happy, then we enter into the darkest phase of dark night, the ego death. You start to let go of all your long-held beliefs, you shed everything that doesn't resonate with your higher self, and then when you go through all this purging and you're left with nothing, it's common to end up in despair. And you'll be like, nothing is going to make me happy. I don't see the purpose in working. I don't feel connected with anybody. No matter how hard I try, it doesn't matter. You just want to be alone, away from all these conditions that you once thought were meaningful. And that's a good thing. When you empty yourself and your mind is quiet, the spirit can come forth and speak clearly and directly to you. When I was at the river and relaxed, I had a strong calling to write and share my ego death experience. My spirit spoke to me in a firm yet peaceful tone, and I resonate with it completely. I already know I want to write, but my egoic fears are preventing me from doing so. Solitude is a good thing. When you are rebuilding yourself and going through a transformation, you don't want other people to influence your choice. Even a spiritual teacher like me will not be able to tell you what you should do with your life, because if you just accept everything that a teacher tells you, it will just be like your ego taking on whatever the society tells us to do. Spiritual teacher can only point you to a direction of your spirit. And what is more important than solitude is silence. If you just isolate yourself and you're filled with despair thoughts, you're not going to hear the spirit guiding you. You're not going to hear your authentic self that well. So how long will the dark night of the soul last? It will depend on how long you take to let go of your old identity, your attachment, and your despair thoughts. Letting go is instantaneous. The universe doesn't give you something that you cannot handle, but the ego will be like, no, let me try one more time, and be in denial. Or it will say like it won't work and be in despair. Remember, you cannot be both a caterpillar and a butterfly at the same time. You have to let go of your identity as a caterpillar before you can be a butterfly. So what do you want to be, a caterpillar or a butterfly? It's a choice you have to make. When you're ready to be free and fly like a butterfly, that's when your inner guidance will come. That's because, guess what? You are already the butterfly. You just need to tune yourself to the frequency of the butterfly to hear the guidance. After my first dark night, I wrote this book called The Emotional Gift. And after my second dark night, I wrote this book called Reconnect to Love. If your dark night has to do with your career or your relationship, do check out these two books in the video description below. But if your dark night is triggered by losing someone important, watch this next video on grief and loss.